In the heart of a remote, picturesque village, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, life moved at a gentle, unhurried pace. The villagers, humble and content, lived in harmony with the land, cultivating their fields and tending to their livestock. This tranquil village, with its cobblestone paths and thatched-roof cottages, seemed untouched by the passage of time. Among the inhabitants of this idyllic place was Nima, an ancient and mystical snake. Nima was no ordinary serpent. She belonged to a lineage of shapeshifters, gifted with the ability to transform into human form. This rare power, passed down through generations, allowed Nima and her family to coexist with nature, protecting their home from any who might seek to harm it. Nima's family included her beloved husband and their numerous offspring. They lived deep within the forest, in a hidden sanctuary known only to them. This forest was a realm of magic and wonder, where towering trees whispered ancient secrets, and the air was thick with the scent of wildflowers. The animals of the forest, from the smallest insects to the grandest deer, revered NAIMA and her kin, recognizing their guardianship of the sacred land. For centuries, the village and the forest had coexisted in a delicate balance. The villagers respected the boundaries of the forest, knowing it was a place of mystery and power. They often spoke of the guardian spirits that dwelled within, offering prayers and leaving small offerings at the edge of the woods to honor these unseen protectors. However, the peaceful existence of the village and the forest was about to be threatened by the ambitions of a newly crowned king. This king, young and eager to make his mark, had recently returned from the city where he had been educated. He was full of grand ideas and modern visions, eager to transform his village into a beacon of progress and prosperity. The king's name was Emeka, and his return was met with both excitement and trepidation. The villagers had heard tales of the wonders of the city, its towering buildings, bustling markets, and technological marvels. Yet they also feared the changes that might come with these advancements, worried that their simple way of life could be upended. King Emeka's ambition knew no bounds. He dreamed of building a grand factory that would bring jobs and wealth to his people. He envisioned a village that was no longer isolated, but connected to the wider world, a hub of activity and industry. His enthusiasm was infectious, and many villagers were swept up in his vision, eager to see what the future might hold. However, in his fervor, King Emeka made a fateful decision. The site chosen for the new factory was none other than the heart of the ancient forest. To him it seemed the perfect location, spacious, secluded, and rich with natural resources. He saw the forest as an untapped asset, ready to be harnessed for the greater good of his people. Unbeknownst to him, this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would lead to unimaginable tragedy. For the forest was not just a piece of land. It was a living, breathing entity, home to countless creatures and the mystical family of NAIMA. The balance that had existed for centuries was about to be shattered. As word of the king's plans spread, the villagers were divided. Some saw it as a golden opportunity, a chance to break free from the hardships of rural life. Others, however, felt a deep unease, sensing that disturbing the ancient forest could bring unforeseen consequences. Amidst the growing anticipation and tension, NAIMA and her family remained unaware of the impending doom. They went about their days, caring for their home and each other, blissfully ignorant of the storm that was about to descend upon them. In the quiet corners of the village, whispers of change grew louder. The king's vision of progress loomed large, casting a shadow over the simple, harmonious life that had defined the village for so long. The stage was set for a confrontation between the old and the new, nature and progress, tradition and ambition. As the first trees fell to the king's decree, the serene village and its enchanted forest would never be the same again. The fate of NAIMA, her family, and the village itself hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of an uncertain future. King Emeka stood at the edge of the forest, surveying the vast expanse of greenery before him. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. To him, this forest represented untapped potential, a canvas upon which he could paint his vision of progress and prosperity. He could already hear the hum of machinery, the clatter of construction, and the bustling of workers. Emeka's journey to this moment had been one of dreams and determination. As a young prince, he had been sent to the city to receive an education, a rare privilege for someone from a remote village. In the city, he was exposed to modern wonders, electricity, towering buildings, and bustling marketplaces. The contrast between the city's vibrancy and his village's simplicity was stark, and it ignited a burning desire within him to bring similar advancements to his home. Upon his return, Emeka was crowned king, inheriting the responsibility of leading his people into a new era. His education had filled him with ideas and plans, and he was eager to implement them. He envisioned a village that was no longer cut off from the rest of the world, but connected through roads, technology, and commerce. His grandest idea was the construction of a factory, which he believed would provide jobs, improve living standards, and transform the village into a beacon of progress. The villagers had mixed reactions to the king's ambitions. Many were intrigued and hopeful, enticed by the promise of a better future. They had heard stories of the city's prosperity and were eager to share in its benefits. Others, however, were skeptical. They valued their simple way of life and feared the changes that modernity might bring. The forest, in particular, held a special place in their hearts. It was a place of mystery and reverence, and many believed it should remain untouched. The king's advisors were a mix of old and new. Some were traditionalists who urged caution, reminding the king of the village's history and the importance of preserving its heritage. Others, younger and more progressive, supported Emeka's vision wholeheartedly. They saw the factory as a stepping stone to a brighter future, one that would bring prosperity and opportunity to their remote village. Emeka listened to both sides but was resolute in his decision. He believed that progress required bold actions and sacrifices. The forest, with its vast resources and prime location, was the perfect site for the factory. He assured his people that the benefits would far outweigh the costs. Jobs would be created, infrastructure would be developed, and the village would flourish like never before. With his mind made up, Emeka ordered the commencement of the project. Workers were hired, machinery was brought in, and the forest clearing began. The villagers watched with a mix of anticipation and trepidation as the first trees were felled. The sound of axes and saws echoed through the air, signaling the start of a new chapter in their village's history. However, not all shared the king's enthusiasm. The elders of the village, who held the oral history and traditions of their people, were deeply concerned. They knew the forest was more than just a collection of trees. It was a living entity, home to countless creatures and ancient spirits. Disturbing it could have unforeseen consequences, they warned, but their voices were drowned out by the clamor of progress. Unbeknownst to King Emeka and the villagers, the clearing of the forest had deeper ramifications than they could imagine. In the heart of the forest, hidden from human eyes, NAIMA and her family sensed the disturbance. The ground trembled with the vibrations of machinery, and the air was thick with the scent of cut wood and burning brush. The once serene sanctuary was now a place of chaos and destruction. NAIMA's husband, a wise and cautious snake, sensed the danger first. He urged his family to retreat further into the forest, away from the encroaching humans. But the destruction was swift and relentless. Trees that had stood for centuries were brought down in a matter of hours, and the underbrush was set ablaze to clear the land. In the ensuing chaos, NAIMA's family, including her beloved husband and their offspring, were caught in the destruction. NAIMA herself was away when the devastation struck. She had ventured deeper into the forest in search of food, leaving her family behind. When she returned, she was met with a scene of utter desolation. The once vibrant and harmonious forest was reduced to a smoldering wasteland. The air was thick with smoke and the ground was littered with the remains of ancient trees. Worst of all, her family was gone, their lives claimed by the senseless destruction. In the quiet hours before dawn, Naima stood at the edge of the desolate clearing that had once been her home. The ruins of her sanctuary, the lifeless bodies of her family, and the charred remains of ancient trees filled her vision. Her grief was immeasurable, a deep, abiding sorrow that threatened to consume her. Yet beneath the sorrow, a fierce and unrelenting rage simmered, growing stronger with each passing moment. Naima's mind raced with thoughts of vengeance. She had to make the king and his people feel the pain they had inflicted upon her in the forest. Her shape-shifting abilities, a gift that had been passed down through generations of her kind, would be her most potent weapon. She would use them to infiltrate the village, to gain the trust of the humans, and to strike when they least expected it. With a determined resolve, Naima began her transformation. Her serpentine form elongated and twisted, her scales giving way to smooth, flawless skin. Her eyes, once slitted and golden, softened into deep brown pools, capable of conveying warmth and kindness. She transformed into a beautiful woman, her hair cascading in dark waves around her shoulders, her movements graceful and alluring. As Naima made her way towards the village, she crafted a story for herself. She would be a healer, a traveler from a distant land who had come to offer her services to those in need. Her knowledge of herbs and natural remedies, gained from centuries of living in the forest, would lend credibility to her guise. She knew that the villagers, unaware of her true identity, would welcome her with open arms. Upon entering the village, Naima was greeted with curiosity and admiration. Her beauty and charm captivated the villagers, who quickly spread word of the new healer among them. Naima set up a small hut near the edge of the village, where she began treating the sick and injured, offering remedies that seemed almost magical in their effectiveness. Her reputation grew, and soon people from neighboring villages came seeking her aid. The villagers were grateful for Naima's presence, seeing her as a blessing during a time of change and uncertainty. They confided in her, sharing their fears and hopes for the future. Naima listened patiently, offering words of comfort and reassurance. All the while, she observed, learning about the village's dynamics, the relationships between its inhabitants, and most importantly, the inner workings of the royal household. King Emeka, intrigued by the tales of the new healer's beauty and skill, invited Naima to the palace. He was immediately struck by her presence, her calm demeanor, and the air of mystery that surrounded her. He welcomed her as an honored guest, eager to learn more about her and to benefit from her knowledge. Naima accepted the king's invitation with a sense of purpose. She knew that getting close to Emeka was crucial for her plan of vengeance. As she settled into the palace, she began to weave herself into the fabric of the royal household. She charmed the courtiers, gained the trust of the servants, and made herself indispensable to the queen and the king's children. Naima's beauty and kindness soon captivated the king himself. Emeka found solace in her presence, a respite from the growing tensions and responsibilities of his rule. He confided in her, seeking her counsel on matters of state and personal issues. Naima listened attentively, offering advice that seemed wise and compassionate, all the while hiding her true intentions. With each passing day, Naima's influence in the palace grew. She began to sow seeds of discord, subtly manipulating the relationships within the royal family. She whispered lies and half-truths, creating mistrust and suspicion between the king, the queen, and their children. The once harmonious household soon became fraught with tension and strife, the bonds of love and loyalty fraying under the weight of Naima's machinations. The queen, once a pillar of strength and support for the king, began to doubt his decisions. She questioned his judgment, particularly regarding the destruction of the forest and the construction of the factory. The king, already burdened by the enormity of his plans, found himself increasingly isolated, his authority eroded by the whispers of dissent. Naima's plan was unfolding perfectly. She reveled in the chaos she was creating, knowing that it was only the beginning. Her next move would be to strike at the heart of the village itself, to bring about a calamity that would weaken the king's rule and drive the villagers to despair. Using her knowledge of herbs and poisons, NAIMA concocted a deadly potion. She spread the poison discreetly, contaminating the village's water supply and food stores. It didn't take long for the effects to become apparent. People began to fall ill, their bodies racked with fever and pain. The sickness spread rapidly, and soon the entire village was gripped by a deadly plague. The villagers who had once looked to NAIMA as their savior now turned to her in desperation, begging for a cure. NAIMA, maintaining her guise as a compassionate healer, promised to do everything in her power to help. She offered remedies that provided temporary relief but did not cure the sickness. The villagers, too sick and scared to question her, placed their trust in her hands. King Emeka, seeing his people suffer, was consumed with guilt and fear. He turned to NAIMA, pleading with her to save his village. NAIMA, savoring the king's desperation, assured him that she was working tirelessly to find a cure. She continued to manipulate him, deepening his dependence on her and further eroding his authority. As the plague ravaged the village, fear and despair took hold. The once tight-knit community began to fracture, as people turned on each other in their desperation to survive. The king's grand vision of progress and prosperity lay in ruins, his dreams shattered by the very person he had welcomed into his palace. NAIMA, now firmly established in her guise as a healer, continued to gain the trust and admiration of the villagers. Her knowledge of herbs and remedies seemed almost supernatural, and her beauty captivated everyone who met her. The village, already in turmoil due to the king's ambitious plans, found a beacon of hope in NAIMA, unaware of her true intentions. Every day, NAIMA would attend to the sick and injured, her gentle touch and soothing words providing comfort. She would walk through the village, her presence a calming influence in the midst of chaos. Her reputation as a healer spread far and wide, drawing people from neighboring villages who came seeking her aid. NAIMA's plan was unfolding perfectly, and she savored the trust she was building, knowing it would soon turn to her advantage. King Emeka, enthralled by NAIMA's charm and impressed by her abilities, invited her to stay permanently in the royal palace. He saw in her not only a valuable ally, but also a symbol of the progress and enlightenment he hoped to bring to his people. NAIMA accepted the invitation, knowing it was the perfect opportunity to get closer to the king and further her plans for revenge. In the palace, NAIMA quickly became a favored guest. She charmed the courtiers with her grace and intelligence, and even the queen, initially wary of the new arrival, found herself drawn to NAIMA's warmth and compassion. NAIMA's influence within the palace grew steadily, and she used it to observe and manipulate the dynamics of the royal household. NAIMA's presence brought a sense of unease to the palace, though few could pinpoint the source. She began to sow seeds of discord subtly, planting doubts and suspicions in the minds of those around her. She whispered in the queen's ear, suggesting that the king's plans were reckless and endangering the village. To the king, she hinted at the queen's growing dissatisfaction and mistrust. The royal children, once a unified front, began to bicker and vie for their parents' attention, each believing the other was favored. As the royal family grew more divided, NAIMA focused on her next objective: to bring about a calamity that would further destabilize the village. She began to concoct a deadly potion, using her extensive knowledge of herbs and poisons. NAIMA spent her nights gathering rare ingredients from the remnants of the forest, blending them with meticulous care to create a brew that would unleash a plague upon the village. The villagers, still unaware of NAIMA's true nature, continued to trust her implicitly. When the first signs of illness appeared, they turned to her for help. NAIMA offered remedies that provided temporary relief but did not cure the sickness. She watched with a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow as the plague spread, knowing that her actions were necessary to avenge her family's death. The plague took hold swiftly, its effects devastating. People who had once been healthy and strong were reduced to shadows of their former selves, racked with fever and pain. The village, once bustling with life, became a place of fear and despair. The sick filled NAIMA's hut, their cries for help echoing through the night. King Emeka, desperate to save his people, sought NAIMA's counsel. He pleaded with her to find a cure, to use her extraordinary skills to end the suffering. NAIMA, maintaining her facade of compassion, promised to do everything in her power to help. She continued to provide temporary remedies, each time deepening the villagers' dependence on her. The king's once unshakable confidence began to erode. He saw his vision of progress crumbling before his eyes, his dreams of a prosperous future turning into a nightmare. The villagers, once supportive and loyal, began to question his leadership. Whispers of rebellion grew louder, and the king found himself increasingly isolated. NAIMA's plan was working. She had sown discord within the royal family, brought about a deadly plague, and undermined the king's authority. Yet she knew that her vengeance was not complete. The time was approaching for her to reveal her true identity to the king, to confront him with the full extent of his actions and the devastation he had caused. One evening, as the sun set over the village, casting long shadows across the landscape, NAIMA prepared for the final phase of her plan. She donned a cloak that shimmered with an otherworldly light, a symbol of her true nature. Her heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation and sorrow, knowing that the confrontation ahead would be both the culmination of her revenge and a painful reminder of her loss. NAIMA entered the royal palace, her steps echoing in the grand hallways. She made her way to the king's chambers, where Emeka sat, surrounded by the trappings of his failed ambitions. He looked up as she entered, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. "NAIMA," he said, his voice trembling, "have you found a cure?" NAIMA approached him slowly, her eyes fixed on his. "King Emeka," she began, her voice steady and calm, "I have come to reveal the truth." With a graceful motion, NAIMA removed her cloak, revealing her true form. The shimmering scales, the serpentine eyes, the aura of ancient power, all were laid bare before the king. Emeka recoiled in shock and fear, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. "I am NAIMA, guardian of the forest you have destroyed," she said, her voice filled with both sorrow and fury. "You have brought death and devastation to my home, to my family, and now you and your people shall face the consequences of your actions." Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell in order to be notified when another video is being posted.